Did you know that the top 3 industries that have created the most self-made millionaires in the UK is retail, entertainment, and property? And in this video, I'm paying my knowledge forward to you by talking about buy-to-let mortgages and why they are so important to me and almost every property investor millionaire under the sun, because they have quite literally helped me build my UK-wide home buying company, estate agency, and my own personal property portfolio. So not only does that give me the inside scoop and access to information you probably don't have, but quite literally using buy-to-let mortgages properly is essential to mine and my clients' success. So let's get into it. But before we do, how long do you think buy-to-let mortgages have actually existed for? Well, they were actually first introduced in 1996 and they supercharged the buy-to-let property market. It all of a sudden meant you didn't need cash to buy a property investment. You could do it with a small deposit, sometimes no deposit at all, and borrow the rest. Now, as you can imagine, this made buying buy-to-let property so much easier to invest in, and as a result, the percentage of buy-to-let mortgages climbed and climbed and climbed year by year as more and more people realised the value of them. It didn't just help new investors entering the property market for the first time, but it also helped existing property investors multiply their property portfolio, as you can see here. This shows how year after year investors' individual property portfolios climbed and climbed in value as a direct impact of buy-to-let mortgages, because they were essentially able to buy even more property using buy-to-let mortgages, using other people's money. Right now, they are as important today as they were when they were introduced back in 1996. And I'll go as far as to say the property investment market is so dependent on them, it would collapse without them. I've broken this video into 3 sections you can flip between, although if you're serious about this topic, I do recommend you watch the whole thing. The sections are: number 1, the power of the mortgage; 2, how to choose the right one; and finally 3, my top tips to maximize the upside of buy-to-let mortgages and minimize your downsides to them. Section 1, the power of the mortgage. If in 1996, 28 years ago, when the buy-to-let mortgage was introduced, you had £50,000 of cash to invest, and you decided to put £25,000 into an S&P 500 index fund and the other £25,000 into UK property, your £25,000 on each of those investments would have turned into just under £214,000 with your S&P 500 index fund investment, and just under £126,000 with your UK property investment. And I think this surprises people because there is often this belief property is the best investment of all, when in reality, if not done properly, there are far, far easier ways to make money more passively. So why bother with property investing when there are easier, more passive ways to make money? Well, the reason property investment is so popular amongst investors is the beauty of financial leverage, introduced in the form of buy-to-let mortgages. You can't easily raise debt or a mortgage against index fund investments or to buy bonds or stocks, but you can against property. So if we run that exact same example, but this time assume you had invested the same amount using 75% buy-to-let mortgages, your same £50,000 cash split in 2 would now be worth the same £213,957 with the S&P 500 index fund investment, but would be worth just over £428,000 after you deduct the original 75% mortgage. So the introduction of the buy-to-let mortgages into the equation over triples the amount of money you make and makes property investment twice as profitable than if you put your money in a top-performing index fund like the S&P 500. And the crazy thing is, we haven't even got to the best part of buy-to-let mortgages, and that is who pays for them. You use a buy-to-let mortgage to buy the property. You then rent the property out and collect the rent. You then use the rent to pay for the mortgage, for maintenance, and you keep the rest as profit. So I know a lot of people don't like the phrase the tenant pays the mortgage, but in reality, if managed correctly, that is exactly what happens. The skill to being successful in property investing is keeping this cycle going and going. I've got loads of other videos on my channel that can educate you on how to build a great portfolio for free. But I'm hoping by this stage in this video, it is starting to click to you how valuable buy-to-let mortgages can be to you and to investors. Now let's get into section 2, how to choose the right one. Now, to choose the right buy-to-let mortgage, you need to have an understanding of the actual process. Here I've got it laid out in 9 simple steps. I'm going to break down the core things I think you should understand in a moment. But before I do, in reality, the thing that will undoubtedly have the biggest impact on how this all goes for you is to deal with a reputable mortgage broker and conveyancer. The mortgage broker, their whole job will be to help you find the best mortgage product, and the conveyancer will deal with the legal process. And between the two of them, they will essentially handhold you through the 9-step process. If you're not sure who to use, my firms are linked in the description below. And I've literally spent years of my life trialing and erroring a whole bunch of different companies. But let's get into the core things I think you should understand about buy-to-let mortgages to make sure you're choosing the right one for you. You may already be familiar with the fact that most residential mortgages are capital and interest, which means in your monthly repayments, you'll be paying off the interest on the money you've borrowed and also a part of the actual loan. So if you get a 25-year repayment mortgage, for instance, after 25 years, you would have paid off all of the debt. However, most buy-to-let mortgages are interest only, which means your monthly payments are less as you're only paying the interest. You're not actually paying any of the mortgage down itself. It basically means when your mortgage expires, you'll have to sell the property to pay the mortgage back. Or what most investors will do is you just keep remortgaging the property to cover that debt that has never actually decreased over the time you've had the mortgage. The idea is this doesn't matter because the aim of the game is you want the rent you collect to be as high as possible and your monthly payments to be as low as possible. And essentially the money in between, the bit in the middle, leaves you money to cover your costs and importantly, leaves you a profit, which you can then reinvest to keep building your property portfolio. And this, my friends, is actually what mortgage providers care the most about. What a mortgage company mostly cares about is not so much about you, although there are some things about you that are important, and I'll get into those later in the video. But what a mortgage company mostly cares about is the chances your rental property is going to actually be able to cover your mortgage payments through rent. They figure this out by calculating the ICR, or the interest coverage rate, which isn't as complicated as it sounds. They are basically stress testing your property investment, which basically means they look at what your monthly payments are going to be. And as long as the rent is at least 125% of the monthly mortgage, although sometimes it can be as high as 150% of the monthly mortgage, they're most likely going to be happy with the property and give you the money. So if the mortgage, for example, is £500 per month, you'll need to show that you can collect £625 per month in rent or £750 per month in rent if they want the cover to be 150%. The main thing lenders care about, guys, when it comes to you personally is you're going to want to have ultimately a good credit score. In general, the better the credit score, the more likely it is you're not only going to get a mortgage, but you're going to have access to better rates. In general, the better your credit score, the lower the risk you are to someone lending you money. They're also going to want to make sure you ideally already own a home, that you have a minimum level of income of at least £25,000 or above. It can sometimes be a bit lower. And you are of a minimum age of 18, but many lenders will only consider you if you're over 21. And they're also going to consider your current property portfolio. So if you already have 4 or more properties, you're actually considered a portfolio landlord, which obviously sounds quite cool, but in reality it means a lender is going to want to stress test not just the property you want to buy, but the portfolio you have in general to make sure your property portfolio is in general performing well enough to keep building on. So look friends, at this stage I'm hoping you've got a good understanding of how important buy-to-let mortgages are and how they're not as complicated as they seem. But let's get into the most important part of the video. Section 3, my top tips. Property investment is not risk-free. About 15% of properties in the UK are buy-to-let investments, but despite this, landlords get repossessed a lot more often than residential homeowners, as shown here. And this is something that is getting worse at the moment, given the increases in interest rates we're all experiencing and have experienced. I'm not trying to put you off property investing here, quite the opposite. I want you to realise that property investing is highly lucrative, but only if done properly. Here are my 3 top tips. 1, you must deal with a mortgage broker. Their whole job is to understand what you need and find you the best deals possible. It is the definition of shopping around for the best price. But most importantly, you can't just use any mortgage broker. You need to use ones with access to the whole of the market. If you deal with one particular lender or a broker with a limited view of the market, you can easily miss out on the cheapest deals available to you in the market. And that quite literally takes profit out your pocket. I've got links in the description below to my mortgage broker if you want to access who I personally use. 2, get a fixed rate mortgage. When you get a mortgage, you usually have a choice of a fixed or variable rate. In short, what this means is a fixed rate is as it sounds. It is a specific interest rate you pay for the entire term of the mortgage. It doesn't go up or down if mortgage rates go up or down. Whereas a variable rate will go up and down dependent on the Bank of England's interest rate. So if interest rates go up, then your payments go up. But if they go down, your payments go down. It's essentially a gamble to go for variable rates. Personally, I think the peace of mind a fixed rate gives you is non-negotiable in my life. I'm not willing to lose sleep over interest rates. And finally, 3, build a high-yielding property portfolio. What this means is you want the rent you charge tenants to be at the highest percentages possible against the property value. So, for example, if you have a £100,000 property and you rent it at a 5% yield, that will generate you £5,000 income a year. But if you can generate a 10% yield for that same £100,000 property, you can then generate £10,000 of income. So clearly, the higher the percentage yield, the better. And it also protects you from things like interest rates rising that have really hurt landlords with low yielding property portfolios. Those are the landlords that are hurting the most right now. Achieving a high yielding property portfolio is easier said than done, and if you don't know how to do it, subscribe to my channel and check out the next video up here.